The Galactic Council of Planetary Subjugation had a perfect record. 147 Deathworlds conquered, 0 failures, 0 survivors left unconquered, 0 questions asked about their methods, until Tuesday. Commander Blorthak of the Nexilian Conquest Fleet was having what could only be described as the worst possible start to his morning. His tentacles were tangled in his uniform again. His coffee substitute tasted like liquidized disappointment. And worst of all, someone had just handed him a file marked with the dreaded crimson stamp, Impossible Conquest Classification. "Sir," wheezed his assistant, a nervous creature named Quibbleton, whose species had evolved from what could only be described as anxious pudding. "The High Command wants to know if we're really going to attempt this one." Blorthak's 3 eyes focused on the planetary designation with the kind of horror usually reserved for tax audits or family reunions. Earth, classification, extinction event guaranteed, survival probability, mathematically negative. He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow managed to sound incredulous. "Negative probability, Quibbleton. How does something have negative probability?" "Well, sir," Quibbleton's gelatinous form quivered with what might have been knowledge or possibly just fear. "Apparently, the inhabitants have managed to create survival situations that are so statistically impossible that they've broken our computational models. Our best scientists believe they've discovered a new branch of mathematics entirely. They're calling it applied impossibility." Blorthak stared at the file as if it might spontaneously combust, which, given their track record with Earth-related materials, was entirely possible. The planet had already destroyed 3 of their survey drones simply by existing in its general vicinity. One had apparently been eaten by something called a honey badger. Another had been dissolved by rain. Rain! The third had simply given up and filed a resignation letter. "Let me understand this correctly," Blorthak said, his voice taking on the tone of someone who was beginning to suspect the universe was playing a particularly elaborate practical joke on him. "We've conquered planets where the atmosphere is liquid fire. We've subjugated worlds where gravity flows backwards and time runs sideways. We've successfully dominated a planet that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously and was inhabited by mathematical concepts with anger management issues. Yes, sir, the conceptual rage entities were surprisingly reasonable once we explained our standardized conquest procedures. And yet this..." Blorthak waved a tentacle at the Earth file with the kind of dramatic flourish usually reserved for Shakespearean death scenes. "This is what Command considers our ultimate challenge." Quibbleton's form assumed what might generously be called a shrug, though it looked more like a small gelatinous earthquake. "The preliminary reports are unusual, sir. The inhabitants appear to voluntarily expose themselves to deadly situations for something they call fun. They've weaponized their own atmosphere, consumed toxic substances recreationally, and their young engage in activities that our safety experts have classified as creatively suicidal." Blorthak opened the file with the careful deliberation of someone defusing a bomb while blindfolded and riding a unicycle. The first page made his scales change color involuntarily. They choose to live near volcanic activity, and they call it tourism. That's just page 1, sir. Page 2 covers something called extreme sports, which our xenobiologists believe is their term for elaborate methods of achieving statistical impossibility while experiencing what they describe as pleasure. The commander's 3 eyes began to water, which was particularly impressive considering his species had no tear ducts. "Quibbleton, this can't be accurate. No species survives by deliberately seeking out danger. It goes against every principle of evolutionary biology, common sense, and mathematical probability. Sir, there's more. They've domesticated creatures that could kill them. They consume substances that would hospitalize most galactic species for entertainment, and they've somehow convinced their planet's weather patterns to cooperate with their survival, despite having no apparent technological control over meteorological systems. Blorthak closed the file and immediately wished he hadn't opened it in the first place. Command wants us to conquer this, the inhabitants of a planet so impossibly dangerous that they've evolved to treat mortal peril as a recreational activity. Yes, sir. Standard Protocol Omega-7. Complete planetary subjugation within 48 standard cycles. And Omega-7 was designed for civilized worlds, Quibbleton. Worlds where the inhabitants have a basic understanding of self-preservation. How do you conquer a species that apparently considers death-defying activities to be stress relief? The truth was, Commander Blorthak had never failed a conquest. His record was impeccable, his methods were textbook perfect, and his understanding of standard galactic civilizations was encyclopedic. He knew exactly how to approach any reasonable species with standard surrender demands, appropriate shows of force, and properly intimidating ultimatums. But Earth was not reasonable. The first sign of trouble should have been when their approach vector was greeted not by defensive satellites or military vessels, but by what appeared to be a primitive aircraft trailing a banner that read, "Welcome to Earth. Please drive carefully." "Sir," reported Navigation Officer Flibbert, whose species had evolved from creatures that looked like purple anxiety made manifest, "we're receiving multiple communications from the planet's surface. They're inviting us to something called a barbecue." "A what now?" "Apparently it's a social gathering where they deliberately expose animal proteins to controlled combustion while consuming fermented plant matter and engaging in competitive physical activities." Blorthak's left eye began to twitch. "They want to set things on fire socially? That appears to be the general concept, yes." The second sign of trouble came when they attempted their standard opening gambit. A fearsome display of superior firepower designed to demonstrate the futility of resistance. They had perfected this technique across 147 worlds. A few strategically placed energy discharges into uninhabited areas, some impressive holographic displays of their fleet's capabilities, and usually, within hours, they'd have planetary leadership begging for merciful surrender terms. The humans watched their demonstration with what could only be described as polite interest. "Sir," Flibbert's voice had reached a pitch that suggested his vocal cords were considering filing for workers' compensation. They're applauding our firepower display, and someone's asking if we do birthday parties." "What?" "Several of their communication channels are requesting information about hiring us for what they call entertainment events. They seem to think our energy weapons are some kind of fireworks display." Blorthak felt something that might have been the beginning of a headache if his species had been capable of headaches. Instead, his tentacles began to involuntarily spell out curse words in ancient Nexilian. "They think our planet-cracking weaponry is decorative. One of their leaders is asking if we take requests. Something about wanting to see the blue sparkly ones again." This was not going according to the manual officially titled Efficient Conquest Procedures for Standard Galactic Civilizations, revised edition, now with fewer casualties, was a masterwork of military efficiency. It had been written by the greatest conquest minds in galactic history, tested across dozens of star systems and refined through 147 successful planetary subjugations. Nowhere in its 2,147 pages did it mention what to do when the target species treated your terrifying displays of superior firepower as entertainment. "Sir?" Quibbleton's gelatinous form was now vibrating at a frequency that suggested either extreme nervousness or possibly the early stages of molecular dissolution. "Perhaps we should proceed to Phase 2. Phase 2 involved direct communication with planetary leadership, formal demands for surrender, and the presentation of terms for peaceful subjugation. It was straightforward, diplomatic, and had never failed to produce the desired results. The humans' response to their formal surrender demands was, in Blorthak's professional opinion, the most baffling communication he'd ever received in his extensive military career. "They've sent us a video message, sir," reported Communications Officer Wibbleston, a creature whose species had evolved from what could best be described as nervous static. The planetary leader appears to be laughing at our surrender demands. He's thanking us for the elaborate prank and wants to know if we're from a television program. He's also asking if we need craft services. Blorthak stared at the main screen, where a human leader was indeed laughing, wiping tears from his eyes, and occasionally slapping what appeared to be a wooden surface, while making incomprehensible sounds that their translation systems identified as expressions of extreme amusement. "Sir, he's now asking if we're available for his daughter's wedding next month. Apparently, our alien invasion bit would be absolutely perfect for the reception." "His daughter's wedding?" The human leader continued speaking, his communication growing more enthusiastic by the moment. "He says the bride and groom are both science fiction fans and would be absolutely thrilled to have professional aliens at their special day. He's offering to pay us in something called exposure and all the cake we can eat." Blorthak's scales had now cycled through 17 different colors, including several that didn't technically exist in normal space-time. "They think we're performers?" "Sir, 3 more planetary leaders have now joined the communication. They appear to be bidding for our services. Someone's offering us a multi-picture deal, and another wants to discuss merchandising opportunities." This was definitely not in the manual. The manual had a very specific procedure for dealing with species that didn't immediately surrender. Demonstrate the consequences of resistance through selective destruction of military targets. Show them what happened to those who defied the Nexilian conquest fleet. Make them understand the futility of opposing superior technology and tactics. The humans' response to having their military installations precisely destroyed was to send thank you notes. "Sir," Wibbleston's static-like form was now crackling with what might have been confusion or possibly an electrical malfunction. "They're expressing gratitude for our urban renewal assistance. Apparently, several of the installations we destroyed were scheduled for demolition anyway, and we've saved them considerable expense. They're thanking us for destroying their military bases." One of their generals sent a formal letter of appreciation. He's praising our precision work and asking if we're available for additional demolition projects. There's apparently a shopping mall they've been trying to get rid of for years. Blorthak's tentacles began to spell out increasingly creative profanity in multiple galactic languages simultaneously. "These beings are impossible. How do you intimidate a species that treats military strikes as urban planning assistance?" "Sir, there's more. They've started gathering around our landing sites. They're having parties." "Parties?" "Large social gatherings, sir. They're consuming fermented beverages, engaging in rhythmic movement to organize sound patterns, and taking photographic records of themselves posed with our equipment." The main screen now showed dozens of humans gathered around their deployed conquest vehicles, smiling broadly, making strange gestures with their hands, and consuming what appeared to be combusted animal proteins served in portable containers. "Sir, several of them are asking if they can take selfies with you." "Selfies?" "Apparently it's a form of personal photographic documentation. They want pictures of themselves standing next to the cool alien commander to share on their social networks." Blorthak was beginning to understand why this planet had achieved an extinction event guaranteed classification. The inhabitants weren't just surviving impossible conditions, they were enjoying them. They had somehow evolved past the basic survival instinct that kept most species alive, and had replaced it with what could only be described as weaponized optimism. "Sir," Flibbert's anxious form had now achieved a shade of purple that their medical team would later classify as metaphysically disturbing. "We have a problem. The humans are trying to help us." "Help us?" Help us with what? They've noticed that several of our crew members appear to be experiencing distress about the local atmospheric conditions, and they're offering assistance with acclimatization procedures. The local atmospheric conditions are deadly to most galactic species. Yes, sir, but they don't seem to consider that unusual. They've sent over something called a care package with items they believe will make us more comfortable. Blorthak examined the container that had been delivered to their ship with all the caution he would normally reserve for unexploded ordnance. Inside, he found what appeared to be modified breathing apparatus, protective garments, and several bottles of liquid labeled sunscreen SPF 50 protects against harmful radiation. Sir, there's a note. It says, "Welcome to Earth. We know the UV levels can be a bit intense for off-worlders, so here are some basics to help you enjoy your stay. The breathing masks are set to Earth normal atmosphere. Don't worry, you'll get used to it. The sunscreen is very important. Trust us, you don't want to find out what a sunburn feels like with that kind of skin. P.S. There's a barbecue this Saturday, and you're all invited. Bring whatever food you eat. We'll make sure there's something for everyone." Blorthak stared at the care package as if it contained antimatter wrapped in existential dread. They're worried about our comfort. Sir, there's more. They've set up what they call information booths around our landing sites. They're offering guided tours, local maps, and something called travel insurance. Travel insurance? Apparently, it's protection against unexpected events during one's visit to their planet. The humans seem to believe that since we're tourists from space, we should be properly insured against accidents, acts of God, extreme weather, wildlife encounters, food poisoning, sunburn, altitude sickness, and general misadventures. The commander's three eyes began to focus and unfocus in a pattern that suggested his brain was attempting to reboot itself manually. They think we're tourists? Sir, one of their insurance representatives wants to speak with you about comprehensive coverage for extraterrestrial visitors. She's very concerned that our travel group doesn't have adequate protection against what she calls typical Earth hazards. Typical Earth hazards. She's provided a list, sir. It includes ultraviolet radiation, atmospheric pressure variations, gravitational inconsistencies, weather pattern fluctuations, geological instability, biological contamination, chemical exposure, thermal extremes, and something called wildlife interaction incidents. Blorthak looked at the list with the growing realization that what the humans casually referred to as typical hazards would be classified as extinction-level threats on most civilized worlds. Sir, she's also offering extended coverage for what she calls adventure activities. Apparently, many visitors to Earth engage in recreational pursuits that carry additional risk factors. Recreational pursuits? What kind of recreational pursuits require insurance coverage? The list includes mountain climbing, ocean swimming, desert trekking, jungle exploration, extreme weather viewing, geological formation investigation, wildlife observation, aerial transportation, underground cave systems exploration, and something called extreme sports participation. Nanny Blorthak's scales had now achieved a color that didn't exist in normal space-time and was beginning to hurt Quibbleton's feelings just by being visible. They do all of these things. For fun? Sir, the insurance representative is very excited to meet us. She says it's not often she gets to write policies for actual aliens, and she wants to make sure we have the full Earth experience while staying reasonably safe. Reasonably safe on a planet classified as extinction event guaranteed. Sir, I think that might be the point. The horrible truth was beginning to dawn on Commander Blorthak. These humans had somehow managed to survive on a planet so impossibly dangerous that simply existing there should have been mathematically impossible. But they hadn't just survived, they had thrived. They had turned mortal peril into recreation, transformed life-threatening situations into social activities, and somehow convinced themselves that living on the most dangerous planet in the known galaxy was not just normal, but enjoyable. Sir, Wibbleston's crackling form was now emitting sparks of what might have been enlightenment, or possibly a complete electrical system failure. I'm beginning to think we may have underestimated this species. Underestimated? Quibbleton, we came here to conquer them. Yes, sir, but they've already conquered something much more difficult. What? Death, sir. They've conquered death itself. Not by avoiding it, but by making friends with it. They've turned their entire civilization into an elaborate game of survival, and they're winning. Blorthak stared out at the human settlements visible on the main screen. Millions of beings living casually in conditions that would destroy most galactic civilizations, treating each day as another entertaining challenge rather than a desperate struggle for survival. Sir, we have another communication from the humans. They're asking if we need medical assistance. Medical assistance? Several of our crew members have been observed exhibiting signs of what they call anxiety and stress responses. They're offering to provide counseling services and relaxation therapy. They want to provide US with therapy? Sir, one of their medical professionals is expressing concern about our adaptation difficulties and wants to know if we need help with cultural adjustment. She's offering to prescribe something called anxiety medication and suggests we might benefit from mindfulness training. Blorthak's tentacles began to involuntarily spell out what might have been either ancient Nexilian curses or possibly a resignation letter. They think we need psychological help? Sir, they've also sent over information about local support groups for newcomers to Earth. Apparently, they have organized assistance programs for beings who find their planet a bit overwhelming at first. Support groups. The literature mentions groups for off-world visitors adjustment, extreme environment adaptation, and something called learning to love Earth despite everything trying to kill you support circle. The commander stared at the support group brochures with the kind of fascination usually reserved for particularly interesting traffic accidents. They have regular visitors who need psychological counseling just to cope with living here. Sir, according to this pamphlet, Earth receives approximately 17 million interplanetary tourists annually, and approximately 93% of them require some form of psychological support during their stay. 93%. The brochure says it's completely normal and that most visitors find Earth a bit intense at first, but with proper support and preparation, even the most anxiety-prone species can learn to enjoy the unique challenges of our amazing planet. Blorthak felt something that might have been the beginning of a nervous breakdown if his species had been capable of nervous breakdowns. Instead, his scales began cycling through colors that were actively harmful to observe directly. Sir, there's a personal note attached from someone called Earth Tourist Board Specialist Jennifer. She says she's super excited to meet us and wants to plan some awesome activities for our visit. She's particularly enthusiastic about showing us something called extreme weather viewing and geological instability tourism. Now, she wants to show us geological instability as tourism. Sir, there's an itinerary. Day 1, volcanic activity observation. Day 2, seismic event monitoring. Day 3, severe weather pattern experience. Day 4, oceanic adventure activities. Day 5, desert survival challenges. Day 6, jungle ecosystem immersion. Day 7, urban environment adaptation and cultural integration. They've planned a week of activities designed to kill us. Sir, Jennifer says it's their standard introductory package for hardy species. She notes that she's scaled back the intensity because she assumes we might need time to adjust to Earth's unique charm. Scaled back? She mentions that the full adventure package includes something called extreme altitude activities, deep ocean exploration, polar region survival training, and active combat zone cultural immersion. But she thought those might be a bit much for first-time visitors. Blorthak's 3 eyes were now watering so profusely that his medical officer was beginning to express concern about dehydration. Combat zones? They take tourists to combat zones? Sir, according to Jennifer's credentials, she's a certified guide for extreme environment tourism, hostile situation recreation, and near-death experience adventure planning. She has a 5-star rating from over 3,000 previous clients who survived. Sir, her testimonials are quite enthusiastic. One reviewer says, Jennifer planned the most amazing near-death experience vacation. I almost got eaten by a shark, struck by lightning, and caught in a volcanic eruption all in the same week. Best vacation ever. Would definitely book again. The commander was beginning to suspect that the humans had somehow managed to evolve beyond the basic survival instinct and had replaced it with what could only be described as a recreational death wish. Sir, Flibbert's purple anxiety had now achieved a shade that was causing structural damage to nearby equipment. We may have a larger problem. Command is asking for a status report on the conquest progress. What are we supposed to tell them? That the inhabitants of the most dangerous planet in the galaxy are treating our invasion fleet as a tourist attraction? Sir, perhaps we could explain that the local species presents unique challenges to standard conquest procedures. Unique challenges? Quibbleton, they're asking if they can buy our weapons as souvenirs. Someone wants to know if our planet-cracking missiles come in fun colors and whether we offer bulk pricing for wedding decorations. Sir, Command is also asking why our psychological evaluation reports show that 73% of our crew is now requesting immediate psychiatric evaluation. Blorthak looked around his command center, where indeed most of his normally efficient conquest specialists were exhibiting signs of what could only be described as existential confusion. His weapons officer was staring blankly at a human-provided brochure for extreme adventure vacations. His tactical analyst was reading a pamphlet about learning to embrace mortal peril as a lifestyle choice. His communications specialist was apparently filling out an application for something called Earth citizenship and muttering about work-life balance. Sir, we also have a problem with the crew shore leave requests. Shore leave? We're in the middle of a conquest. Yes, sir. But 47 crew members have formally requested permission to participate in human recreational activities. They want to try something called bungee jumping. Bungee what? It appears to involve attaching oneself to an elastic cord and deliberately falling from extreme heights. The humans describe it as fun and totally safe if you follow proper procedures. They want to deliberately fall from extreme heights. For fun? Sir, our crew seems to find the concept intriguing. They say that after spending their entire careers avoiding dangerous situations, the idea of engaging with danger recreationally has a certain appeal. Blorthak stared at his crew with the growing realization that the humans were somehow converting his conquest specialists into thrill-seeking adventure tourists. Sir, there's more. Lieutenant Flerbnox has signed up for something called skydiving lessons. Ensign Blibberton wants to try rock climbing. And Communications Officer Wibbleston has apparently enrolled in a survival skills course. Survival skills? They're professional military personnel. They already have survival skills. Sir, the humans apparently define survival skills differently than we do. Their course catalogue includes wilderness survival in hostile environments, urban disaster preparedness, emergency medical training for extreme situations, and advanced techniques for surviving acts of God. Acts of God? Sir, I believe it's a human term for natural disasters that are so catastrophically destructive that they're attributed to divine intervention. And they have training courses for surviving divine intervention? Sir, the course description says, learn to thrive when the universe seems personally committed to your destruction. Topics include tornado survival, earthquake preparedness, flood management, volcano evacuation procedures, lightning strike avoidance, extreme weather adaptation, and maintaining positive attitude during natural disasters. It has a 4.7-star rating. Blorthak's understanding of reality was beginning to suffer what could only be described as a catastrophic structural failure. They rate their survival courses like entertainment. Sir, one review says, "Fantastic course. Professor Martinez made surviving catastrophic natural disasters both educational and fun. The hands-on tsunami simulation was especially realistic. Lost my eyebrows but gained valuable life skills. Would definitely recommend to friends." The commander's scales had now achieved a color that was causing temporal distortions in the immediate vicinity. They use tsunami simulations in their educational programs. Sir, there's an entire category of human education called extreme environment training. They have courses for Arctic survival, desert survival, jungle survival, ocean survival, mountain survival, urban disaster survival, and something called zombie apocalypse preparedness. Zombie apocalypse? Sir, I'm not entirely sure what that means, but the course description mentions preparing for the breakdown of civilized society due to undead uprising and maintaining sanity during the collapse of everything you hold dear. They have courses for surviving the collapse of civilization. Sir, it's apparently a very popular topic. There are 17 different programs available, ranging from basic post-apocalyptic survival to advanced wasteland leadership, to rebuilding society after everything goes wrong. Blorthak stared at the course catalogues, with the kind of horror usually reserved for tax audits conducted by beings made of pure bureaucratic nightmare. These humans don't just survive impossible situations, they plan for them, they prepare for them, they educate themselves about them. Sir, I think that might be how they've managed to survive on this planet. They've turned survival itself into a recreational activity. The horrible truth was becoming impossible to ignore. The humans hadn't just adapted to living on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. They had somehow convinced themselves that it was the most interesting planet in the galaxy. They had transformed mortal peril into entertainment, turned life-threatening challenges into social activities, and created an entire civilization based on the principle that if something was trying to kill you, it was probably worth doing. Sir, Quibbleton's gelatinous form was now vibrating at a frequency that suggested either extreme nervousness or possibly the early stages of enlightenment. Command is requesting an immediate update on conquest progress. They want to know when we expect to complete planetary subjugation. Blorthak looked at his crew, who were now enthusiastically planning shore leave activities that would be classified as elaborate suicide attempts on any rational planet. He looked at the humans, who were apparently treating his invasion fleet as the most exciting thing that had happened to them since someone had invented extreme volcano boarding. He looked at the planet Earth, spinning peacefully in space, while casually hosting conditions that would destroy most of galactic civilization. "Quibbleton," he said, his voice taking on the tone of someone who had just discovered that everything he thought he knew about the universe was not just wrong, but hilariously wrong. "I don't think we're conquering this planet. Sir, I think this planet is conquering US." And as if to prove his point, his communication system chimed with an incoming message from the humans. "Hey there, space friends. We've set up a welcome party for your crew. There's going to be live music, traditional Earth food, and we've organized some fun activities to help you experience authentic human culture. We can't wait to show you how we do things here on Earth. P.S. We've prepared some special alien-friendly versions of our favorite extreme sports, so don't worry if your species isn't adapted for our usual recreational activities. We'll make sure everyone has a blast." Commander Blorthak stared at the message for a long moment, then slowly reached for his resignation forms. Some conquests, he realized, were simply impossible, not because the enemy was too strong, but because they were too friendly. The humans had weaponized hospitality, militarized enthusiasm, and somehow managed to turn an invasion into a cultural exchange program. "Sir, Quibbleton asked nervously. Blorthak looked out at Earth one more time, watching the humans prepare for what they clearly considered to be the social event of the century, and made a decision that would echo through galactic conquest history forever. Cancel the conquest, Quibbleton. We're staying for the party. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe isn't a weapon or a threat. It's a species so impossibly optimistic that they can make you forget why you came to destroy them in the first place.